All right, so I finally got to see Hamilton. If you guys listen to this podcast, you know that I'm into Broadway plays, musicals, stuff like that. So just to give you a bit of background of my history with trying to see this play, my brother first put me onto it back in, it was years ago. It was definitely before the play blew up. I want to say it's when it was still off Broadway. But it could have been like just recently on Broadway or something like that. But anyway, he invited me and my wife. We're going to go on like a double date type of thing, but my wife didn't want to go, which I'll never let her live that down because it turned around to become like one of the biggest plays ever. But so I was like, fuck around with her about that. She didn't want to go because it was like, the way my brother described it was like a play. We didn't know much about it. It was like a play about history, and I don't know. She just wasn't into it. I was down to go just because I like seeing plays in general, whether it's the subject matter that I'm into or not. I wasn't going to go without her, and then the play blew the fuck up, and everyone and anyone has been wanting to go since, including my wife. And since then, remember, this is years ago. I want to say maybe 3-4 years ago. I don't know how long it's been. But it has been several years. Since then, I've been trying to win the Hamilton tickets on the lottery, because tickets for the shit is insane. But I've been trying to get tickets to this thing for a long time via the Broadway lottery, which I've mentioned to you folks in the past, and I actually created a separate like tutorial video, which is available on YouTube, and I'll link to it in the episode notes to show you guys how the Broadway lottery works and how to apply for these things. So check that out if you haven't already. I'll link to it again in the episode notes for this episode, so you guys can check it out. I've seen at least, I want to say like half a dozen plays through this lottery alone. And there are, tickets that cost several $100s that you get via the lottery for $30-$40. So it's definitely a dope way to score really good tickets to a great show and a dope experience. But anyway, since then, and this was again 3 or 4 years ago, I've been almost on a daily basis, every single day that I remember. If, out of 365 days out of the year, maybe I'll remember 300 of those days or 250 of those days. I'll apply for this damn lottery. Day in and day out, day in and day out, day in and day out. And I still haven't won it. But my brother was also applying for the lottery, and he won it. Thankfully, he invited me. Shout out to David. We had an awesome experience. What we wound up doing actually is buying one extra ticket and splitting it between 3 people, because his best friend, shout out to Omar, went with us, and we made a night out of it. And the play was off the hook. It lives up to all the hype. Before this, my favorite play of all time was Wicked, which I still think is amazing, but Hamilton trumped it. And I highly recommend you folks checking it out if you can and have the opportunity to do so. So before I jump into my take on the play, let me give you a little bit of background on Mr. Alexander Hamilton, per Wikipedia. So he was an American statesman, a politician, a legal scholar, a military commander, a lawyer, banker, and economist. And he was one of the founding fathers of the United States, and he established and became the first United States Secretary of the Treasury. He also, by the way, founded the nation's financial system, the Federalist Party, the United States Coast Guard, and the New York Post newspaper. This guy was really prolific. And what's even more amazing to me is considering his complete arc, getting to accomplish all these things that I just listed and coming from where he came from. He was born in 1755 or 1757. There's conflicting accounts. in the Caribbean in one of the British islands called Nevis. Oh, he was also a congressman from New York and also the founder of the Bank of New York. He was born out of wedlock to his mother, who had him and his brother. Rachel Fawcett, her name was, and his father was James A. Hamilton, and she was married to someone else, as was he. So it's already kind of like a fucked up situation to be born into. So James Hamilton, Alexander Hamilton's father, wound up leaving them after finding out that her real husband intended to divorce her based on adultery. Long story short, she winds up leaving with the kids, Hamilton and his brother, to St. Croix. Then she wound up getting yellow fever and died in 1768. Hamilton at this time was like 13 or 15 years old, if I'm calculating that right. One of their cousins took them in for about a year or so, and then he wound up committing suicide. Then after that point, him and his brother were separated, and Alexander Hamilton got a job. He got a clerkship with a local import-export firm that traded with New York and New England. And he wound up living there as well at his place of work. And he wound up doing very well there as a trader. He was even like left in charge of the place for like 5 months at a time while the owner was at sea. And he was always reading and teaching himself stuff and writing. And he always wanted more. He was like a very ambitious person, clearly by his resume that I read off to you guys earlier. And he wound up writing a letter to his father, who's still alive, about a hurricane that hit and devastated the area where he lived. And that letter was so detailed and well written that it caught the eye of someone named Hugh Knox, which was a minister and a journalist. I guess the father like gave the letter to that guy to read or something. And the letter wound up getting published in the Royal Danish American Gazette. Then that letter, that story of that hurricane, impressed community leaders who wound up collecting a fund to send Alexander Hamilton to the then North American 13 colonies. Well, actually, let me just say colonies, because I don't know if it was like 13 at that point. And then from there on out, it was off to the races. So this dude went from that to all the other stuff that I mentioned, to becoming a founding father of the United States. And what's even more impressive, just establishing the financial system that's still in place today, and was really like the architect of like so many pillars of our society as we know it now. As far as a strong central banking system, a powerful military, that's what like super impressed me. Like he was so ill with his pen that he went from being an orphan teen in the Caribbean to becoming a founding father and main author of the economic policies of President George Washington. He wrote 51 of the 85 installments of the Federalist Papers, which were like the precursor to the Constitution and still used as a reference today to help interpret Constitution. It's like scary how like forward thinking this guy was. But that's just a little background on him. So back to the play, back to the musical. He was eventually shot by Aaron Burr, which I think a lot of people know. It's like a popularized fact about his death. Even in you know what always reminds me of that, or was the movie Big Daddy, when the little kid has a play in school and he plays Alexander Hamilton, and he's like on stage and he says, "Aaron Burr shot me," or something like that. So I always remember that. But yeah, the play is told, it's narrated, and it's presented through the perspective of Aaron Burr, which is really interesting, because he's like technically like the villain, right, in this story. He killed such an impactful, influential person, but you kind of feel for him throughout as well because it's, told from his point of view, so there's like inherent bias there, but it kind of humanizes him a bit. So the whole play is, it's a musical. It's a hip-hop musical, which means that all the music in it is hip-hop based. And I just want to say that the hip-hop was super dope. Fuck what you heard. Because I heard a lot of like poo-pooing of it. A lot of like BSing. I have no idea why I just used the words poo-pooed and BSing. I heard hate towards, it's not real hip-hop or this, that, and the third. It's like watered down for white people hip-hop or some shit like that. And to that, I want to say that it's written by a playwright. Shout out to Lin-Manuel Miranda, who, by the way, was inspired to write this after like randomly picking up a copy of Alexander Hamilton's autobiography at an airport as a vacation read, and who also wrote In the Heights, by the way. But it's not written by Eminem or Jay-Z or Jadakiss or Nas or any of these folks. It's written by a playwright. And to be able to write any type of song or poem while keeping within the context of a true story, just one song, one poem, one bar, to me is fucking genius. Let alone writing a full-blown musical within those confines. On a creative level, that's so insane to me that anyone that hates on the play for like not being, quote, real hip-hop is not taking that into account, or they're just fucking hating. And like that ability to do that, to write within the context and the confines of something else, like of another scaffolding, if you will, is why I thought that Jay-Z's American Gangster album was so dope. Because he wrote those songs and that album through, at least my interpretation of it, through the eyes and perspective of Frank Lucas, while also like mirroring and bouncing off of his life experiences. And something that I really, really appreciated was that even though the whole thing was hip hop, it wasn't like every single segment was like a 16-bar hook, rap song formula. I don't even know if that's the formula, like 16 bars, or I don't know where I got that number from, but I think it is. I don't know. But you know what I mean, right? Like verse, hook, verse. There were scenes within the play in the convention of 1786, which is what spurred Congress, according to Wikipedia, to call the Constitutional Convention in Philadelphia. Actually, I think the scenes were the Constitutional Convention in Philadelphia, where the Constitution was ratified, and there was like a lot of debating and going back and forth. In those scenes, instead of being written in the rap song format, it was they were written out in battle rap, because it's debating, like going back and forth, and it was a battle rap structure to those scenes, which, being a battle rap fan, I really appreciated. And they weren't like Low Deluxe, Hollow the Don, Iron Solomon type bars or anything like that, but it was still really good. And again, the precision that it takes to pull something like that off is just fucking incredible to me. So anyway, back to the play. After arriving, Hamilton was in relation to Burr. I think Burr was like a teacher or professor of his, I want to say, or maybe just like a big man on campus type of figure. over at King's College, which was later renamed to Columbia. But he was very much so like an established student and person and like member of the community or whatever. The roles were, at least in my interpretation, very much so like Hamilton looked up to him and wanted to like learn from him. But he also had this like burning ambition that just like overexceeded everybody. Like he was like ambitious to a fault. And Hamilton was the way that they depicted him, a kind of like a playboy and like an attractive guy that got girls, and he was very outspoken. He was a great writer. His pen game was on point. And the way I saw their relationship shifting from like mentor to mentee, being like Aaron Burr being like the mentor and Hamilton being the mentee, to them, being like equals, and then Hamilton rising above Burr, at least like social status, and in later years actual like government title statuses. And then that would flip when Aaron Burr became vice president, but I'll get to that in a bit. It came off to me as kind of like I don't know if you guys are Fresh Prince fans. I am. And it was kind of like when Will first goes to Bel Air Academy and Carlton is like the cool kid in school, big man on campus type of thing. We're in a school full of like rich kids, snobs, and nerds. They all kind of like looked up to him. And then Will came, and all Carlton's friends and everybody else in the school immediately looked at Will as like the cool kid in class and the charming guy. And that's how I feel Alexander Hamilton impacted Aaron Burr's like social circles based on how it was depicted in the play. Like if that's factual or true events or based on true accounts and writings and stuff like that, I don't know, but that was just my interpretation of that element of the play, and where I feel like the seeds of resentment began from the side of Burr. Another takeaway I have from the play is that for all his ambition and drive, he was so driven to a fault that his family, I believe, like including his wife and his sons and his kids, rather, like 8 kids, were all secondary. Like they all came second. It was like his ambition and goals for the country, like above all else. And to me, that showed in how there was a scene where his oldest son, Philip, had some sort of beef with somebody that was criticizing him, his father, in school or something like that, and they challenged him to a duel. And instead of like talking his son out of it and saying don't listen to that nonsense, or it's not like your fight to fight, and where my mind would like logically go, he instead kind of like passively gave his son advice of how to go to the duel because you have to. It's your duty now that you accept it or whatever. But not have to actually go through with it. There's a tactic to like aim your gun upwards, and that's you pretty much saying that you showed up for the duel. You stand by, your position in the argument, but you don't want to kill the dude. And his son took that advice, went, and he did as his father told him, but wound up getting shot and killed anyway. And mind you, at this point, his relationship, his marriage is in shambles. He and his wife are separated based on like him cheating on his wife with someone else. But this event, this occurrence of his son dying, was like such a deeply hurtful occurrence that I guess only he and his wife could like truly appreciate. And it was such a confounding experience that it wound up like bringing them back together. Then after all this, he kind of turns over a new leaf in terms of like trying to refocus on family a bit. He's still like writing a lot and practicing law, and Aaron Burr was actually running for governor of New York. And it was thought that, within the political circles, that an endorsement from Hamilton, who, still had a name, would surely clinch it for him. But Hamilton instead wound up endorsing the other guy, Morgan Lewis, who wound up winning based on Hamilton's clout. And Burr was, always kind of sort of had a relationship with Hamilton. And even though there was kind of that resentment that was built up from, again, what I think was those initial social circle related incidents that then wound up escalating to things like this and other occurrences. For example, Hamilton was so influential that he opposed John Adams' re-election campaign, and that wound up making it so that Thomas Jefferson and Aaron Burr wound up tying for the presidency in electoral college votes. And Hamilton, again, with the ability to tip the scales one way or the other, helped defeat Burr and to elect Thomas Jefferson, even though they had philosophical differences. So it was kind of Hamilton kind of had something against Burr, it seemed. It was in the situation like that, it's you feel it, we're tied. So in terms of politically and fairness and stuff like that, it's we're right there. So morally, there's no issue with you favoring me. Philosophically, you agree with me. We've been, friends or friendly at least for years. And we're on the same side of a lot of issues. But Hamilton was known to completely disagree philosophically with Thomas Jefferson. But for some reason, he still supported Thomas Jefferson. So Burr becomes the vice president. And then eventually, after that, winds up running for governor. And Hamilton, again, endorsed the other guy and outwardly campaigned against Burr and wrote him as being unworthy to become governor. So Burr, was fed up. It's pretty much yo, what the fuck? This dude has it in for me. And, I'm sick of this shit already. And Aaron Burr, challenges Alexander Hamilton to a duel. Which, long story short, Alexander Hamilton reluctantly agrees to it and winds up having the duel in Weehawken, New Jersey, which is the same place where his son died 3 years earlier. His plan, similar to what he advised his son to do, was to aim the gun upwards and shoot up in the air, which is called throwing away your fire in duel talk. And which I thought was interesting, that, and I'm not sure if it was purposeful, but it seems that way, that Lin-Manuel Miranda kind of sort of bookended his arc with starting out the play with the song, which is a famous song, you guys can Google it, called I'm Not Throwing Away My Shot, within the context of, an immigrant who gets the money from these folks in the community that believe in him and sending him off to the States, and he's going to be somebody. He's not going to throw away his shot. To end it with his life ending eventually from throwing away his fire, aka throwing away his shot in the duel with Aaron Burr, which I thought that's interesting. So anyway, he does that, and Aaron Burr winds up shooting him anyway, and shoots him in the stomach, in the lower right abdomen, if I'm not mistaken. There were two witnesses there. One of them said that Aaron Burr shot first. The other one said that Hamilton shot first. I think the consensus is that Burr shot first, and Hamilton wound up shooting while he was falling down. And his gun was aimed upwards, and it hit the tree, one of the tree branches above Aaron Burr. And Alexander Hamilton wound up dying the next day on July 12th, 1804. Now, two more takeaways from the play before I round it off is that his wife Eliza then wound up going around, and over the years after her husband's death to his friends and associates and troops that he fought with, and gathered like stories and accounts of Alexander Hamilton, and like spent her days like spreading his word and his legacy and stuff, which was, the pretty like stand-up thing for her to do, especially after, him being unfaithful to her and her not owing him anything. But she knew deeply how important like legacy was to him, and she wanted to carry that out for him. And she also established, they said in the play, the very first orphanage or public orphanage, or I don't know if it's like orphanage period. She established the very first orphanage in New York City, which is like a testament to, him being an orphan at a young age. And I thought that was pretty dope. Lastly, Alexander Hamilton is buried in the Trinity Church Cemetery, which is in the city on Wall Street, and literally 2 blocks away from where I work. And I've gone, I want to say 3 times, but definitely 2 times that I remember, like during like a lunch break. I've gone a couple times, and I walked around. It's like a very small cemetery in like the middle of the city, right by the Freedom Tower that you guys can see. And, people walk around there. There's a couple benches in there. People have lunch there sometimes too. I walked around looking at all like these old ass tombstones from like 1700s, 1800s. I went twice, maybe 3 times, but twice that I can definitely remember. And I cannot find his fucking tombstone. And it's a small cemetery. It's like smaller than 4 square blocks. And I even like Googled like pictures of like his tombstone, and it's not like a little thing. It's like a big structure of a tombstone. You know what I mean? So it's definitely not hard to miss, but I missed it twice. I'm going to give it at least one more try to check it out and pay my respects to that prolific dude. And I don't know, just to see the final resting place of someone who was arguably the most influential person in American history. Oh, and before I forget, there's probably like 3 or 4 occurrences of him. But there's these scenes with King George, I think it was, whose reign the colonies were under. That the way lin-manuel Miranda wrote him provided some like dope like comedic relief for the story. They wrote him like a kind of like a jealous ex-girlfriend or ex-boyfriend that's kind of like, oh, you want to be independent now, oh, you think you can go make it on your own, and blah blah blah. And he was like very like snobby, and you'll come crawling back to me type of demeanor. And it's like a character that you forget about because you get like so enthralled like within the play, and he's kind of like, in my opinion, kind of like refreshing your mental palate with a bit of comedic relief, through all the drama of the actual play. So you kind of forget about him. But every time that I do remember him, it puts a smile on my face because it was funny. Anyway, folks, I digress. Hamilton was dope. The rapping, the hip hop was off the hook. Fuck what you heard. And hats off to lin-manuel Miranda. Definitely check it out. Check it out when and if you can, if and when you can. And again, check out the link in the episode notes for how to score discounted Broadway tickets to this play and others. Actually, to others. This play in particular, Hamilton, you have to now download the Hamilton app. You can apply daily through the app for the lottery, which, by the way, is free to apply. You only pay if you win the tickets and if you choose to purchase the tickets.